Rome did not fall because of barbarians at the gates. The barbarians were the last guests at a funeral that had been underway for centuries. Rome fell because its rulers discovered something dangerous. They discovered they could create money from nothing. And once they learned that trick, they could not stop. The greatest empire in human history was not conquered. It was inflated out of existence. Imagine a coin in your hand. It is small, silver, and bears the face of an emperor. In the year 100 AD, this coin could buy you a full day's labour from a skilled worker. It could purchase a month's worth of wheat for a family. Roman soldiers marched across continents for a salary paid in these coins. Merchants accepted them from Britain to Babylon. This coin was not just metal. It was trust made physical. It was a promise that Rome would endure, that Roman law would protect commerce, that the weight of silver in your palm meant the same thing today as it would tomorrow. For 200 years that promise held. Then, slowly at first, then all at once, the promise was broken. The Roman Empire at its peak stretched across 3 continents. 60 million people lived under its rule. Its roads connected cities from Scotland to Syria. Its aqueducts brought fresh water to 1 million residents in Rome itself. Its armies were the most disciplined fighting force the ancient world had ever seen. And all of it, every road, every aqueduct, every legion, every emperor's palace, was paid for with coins. Taxes flowed in, salaries flowed out. The economy breathed through its currency like lungs drawing air. When the currency was healthy, the empire was healthy. When the currency sickened, everything sickened with it. Rome was a civilization that began as a small city-state, grew into the largest empire the ancient world had ever seen, ruled by kings, then emperors, and lasted for over 1,000 years by mastering law, warfare, and money. It ended not with a single collapse, but with a slow loss of trust in its institutions, its currency, and its ability to hold together something that had grown too large to sustain. To understand what went wrong, you must first understand what went right. In the early days of the empire, Roman money was simple and honest. The silver denarius contained about 95% pure silver. When you held one, you were holding real value, metal that could be melted down and would still be worth what the coin promised. The emperor's face stamped upon it was not the source of its value. The silver itself was the source. The stamp simply certified the weight and purity, a guarantee backed by the power of Rome. This was money you could trust because you did not have to trust anyone. You could weigh it. You could test it. The value was in your hands. Emperors came and went. The silver remained. But empires are expensive. Armies must be paid. Borders must be defended. Citizens must be fed and entertained. The famous bread and circuses were not generosity. They were the cost of keeping a restless urban population from revolt. And as the empire grew, so did the costs. More soldiers meant more salaries. More borders meant more forts. More citizens meant more bread. The question that haunted every emperor was the same. Where does the money come from? There were only 3 answers. You could raise taxes, but taxes made you unpopular, and unpopular emperors had short reigns. You could conquer new territories and plunder their wealth. But by the 2nd century, Rome had run out of rich neighbours to conquer. What remained were forests and deserts, lands that cost more to hold than they produced. Or you could do something clever. You could cheat. Here is where the trouble began. Imagine you are an emperor. Your treasury is running low. Your soldiers are demanding payment. You cannot raise taxes without risking rebellion. You cannot find new gold mines. But you have absolute power over the mints that produce coins, and you realize something. If a denarius is supposed to contain 4 grams of silver, what happens if you only put in 3 grams and mix in 1 gram of copper? The coin looks the same. It spends the same. The soldiers receive their payment. The merchants accept the coin, and you have just created money from nothing. You have taken 4 coins worth of silver and turned it into 5 coins. The extra coin is pure profit, paid for by no one, owed to no one. It feels like magic. It feels like you have solved the problem. Emperor Nero was one of the first to try this trick on a significant scale. Around 64 AD, he reduced the silver content of the denarius from 95% to 93%. A small change, almost invisible. And it worked. The coin still circulated. The soldiers still accepted their pay. No one seemed to notice. So the next emperor did it again, and the next, and the next. Each time the empire faced a crisis, the answer was the same. Make more coins, stretch the silver, mix in more copper. It was so easy. It solved the immediate problem every single time. By the year 180 AD, the denarius was down to 75% silver. By 250 AD, it was barely 40%. By the reign of Emperor Gallienus in the 260 S, the once proud silver denarius was almost entirely bronze, with just a thin wash of silver on the surface that wore off with use. A coin that once gleamed like the moon now looked like a dirty penny, but it still had the emperor's face on it. It was still officially a denarius. The government insisted it was worth the same as always. But here is the thing about cheating. It only works if no one notices, and eventually everyone noticed. The merchants noticed first. When they bit a coin and tasted copper instead of silver, they understood. When they weighed a coin and found it light, they understood. And they responded the only way merchants can. They raised their prices. If the coin was worth less, then they needed more coins to buy the same goods. What cost 1 denarius last year now cost 2, then 5, then 20. The soldiers noticed next. Their salary was fixed in denarii. If each denarius bought less bread, less wine, less of everything, then their salary was shrinking even as the number stayed the same. Soldiers with hungry families are dangerous soldiers. Mutinies became common. Legions declared their generals emperor, hoping a new ruler would pay them properly. Between 235 AD and 284 AD, Rome had more than 50 emperors. Most died violently. The average reign was about 2 years. This was not a succession crisis. It was an inflation crisis wearing a purple cloak. The farmers noticed last, but their response was the most devastating. Why grow extra wheat to sell in the cities if the coins you receive are worthless? Why participate in the economy at all? Farmers began to withdraw into self-sufficiency. They grew only what they needed. They traded directly with neighbours, bypassing money entirely. The great commercial networks that had connected the empire began to wither. Cities shrank. Trade routes fell silent. The economy was not collapsing. It was fragmenting into 1,000 local pieces that no longer needed each other. This is what inflation does to a society. It does not just raise prices, it destroys trust. And when trust dies, cooperation dies with it. Every transaction becomes a battle. Every coin becomes a question mark. People stop planning for the future because the future is unknowable. They hoard real goods, tangible things that cannot be debased. Gold, land, grain, anything but money. The emperors tried to fix the problem, but their fixes made it worse. Emperor Diocletian, who ruled from 284 to 305 AD, issued the famous edict on maximum prices. He declared by imperial decree that no one could charge more than a specified amount for goods and labour. A pound of beef could cost no more than 8 denarii. A haircut could cost no more than 2. Death was the penalty for violators. Merchants were executed for charging too much. Farmers were executed for refusing to sell, and still the edict failed. When prices are fixed but the money keeps losing value, goods simply disappear. Merchants hide their wares, farmers bury their grain, the economy goes underground, black markets flourish. The government, trying to control everything, ends up controlling nothing. Diocletian also tried to reform the currency itself, introducing new coins with supposedly guaranteed silver content. But by then, no one believed. The trust was gone. When a new coin appeared, people assumed it too would be debased soon enough. They treated it accordingly. The reform failed before it began because belief in money is like belief in a god. Once faith is lost, no ritual can restore it. Now here is the part of the story that should sound familiar. The Roman Empire did not vanish overnight. It lingered for centuries in the West, and over 1,000 years in the East. But the society that emerged from the inflation crisis was not the society that went in. Rome before the debasement was urban, commercial, literate, and connected. Rome after was rural, local, suspicious, and fragmented. The great cities emptied out. The population of Rome itself fell from over 1 million to perhaps 30,000. Not because of invasion, because the economic system that fed a city of 1 million had collapsed. The legions could no longer be paid in worthless coins, so emperors began paying them in land. Soldiers became farmers tied to specific plots. Tax collectors could no longer collect worthless currency, so taxes were demanded in goods. Farmers delivered grain and livestock directly to the government. The sophisticated monetary economy that had made Rome great was replaced by something older and cruder. Barter, feudalism, local lords offering protection in exchange for labour. The medieval world was being born in the ruins of Roman inflation. Who benefited from all of this? In the short term, every emperor who debased the currency bought himself time. Soldiers were paid, crises were postponed, the bill was passed to the future. In the long term, no one benefited. Everyone lost. But the losses were not distributed equally. The rich, who owned land and gold and real things, survived. They retreated to country estates that became self-sufficient fortresses. The poor, who depended on wages paid in money, were destroyed. A working man in 100 AD could feed his family with his earnings. A working man in 300 AD could not. The same job, the same labour, the same hours, but the money had become a lie. There is a cruel irony in how civilizations die. The very tool that makes complexity possible becomes the weapon that destroys it. Money allows strangers to cooperate. It allows a farmer in Egypt to feed a soldier in Britain without ever meeting him. It allows specialization and trade and cities and art and everything we call civilization. But money only works if it can be trusted, and the temptation to betray that trust is always present, whispering to every ruler that the easy solution is available, that the bills can be paid tomorrow, that no one will notice a little less silver, a little more base metal, a little more creative accounting. The barbarians who finally overran the Western Empire in 476 AD were not facing the Rome of Augustus. They were facing a hollow shell, an empire that had already consumed itself from within. The legions were shadows of their former strength, paid in debased coins that bought nothing, led by generals who were themselves former barbarians. The cities were half empty, the roads were crumbling. The great commercial networks had long since fallen silent. The barbarians did not conquer Rome. They simply moved into a house whose foundations had already rotted away 2,000 years later. We tell ourselves that we are different. We have economists now. We have central banks. We have sophisticated theories about monetary policy. Our currencies are not made of metal that can be clipped or debased. They are numbers and computers, abstractions backed by the full faith and credit of governments. But the fundamental arithmetic has not changed. When governments spend more than they collect, the difference must come from somewhere. And the easiest somewhere is always the same. Create more money, dilute the value of what exists, pass the cost to the future, call it policy. Perhaps the Romans were not as foolish as we imagine. Perhaps they too had sophisticated justifications for their choices. Perhaps their emperors believed they were managing crises responsibly, buying time for solutions to emerge. Perhaps they told themselves that this debasement would be the last, that the next emperor would restore sound money. Perhaps they looked at the stability of the past and assumed it would continue into the future, that the system was too large and too important to ever truly fail. The coins tell a different story. You can hold them in your hand today, these ancient denarii, and watch the decline with your own eyes. Early coins are thick and silver white. Later coins are thin and bronze green. The faces of the emperors change, but the trajectory does not. Each ruler inherited a problem and made it worse. Each solution became tomorrow's crisis. Until one day, there was no more silver left to remove, no more tricks left to play, and the only thing remaining was the long, slow collapse into something smaller and poorer and less connected. Rome was not murdered. Rome committed suicide, one coin at a time, and the weapon was the same one every empire eventually discovers, the same one we hold in our hands today, the ability to create money from nothing. The temptation is eternal, and so far the ending has always been the same. The only question is whether we remember.